computer.
Hi, Chris. Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm looking forward to this because it's just got such broad reach appeal to people, and the questions that have come in are quite, I've got to be honest with you, are very, very specific. It's quite amazing. But
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to kick off with two very generic questions. The first one is from a guy called John Savage, who actually says, "Can you tell me what is chemo? What's chemotherapy?"
I think you'd have to go back in time. Chemo is something that's kind of evolved. So chemo was the use of toxic compounds to attack originally fast growing cells, which cancer cells were. And what they've really tried to do over the years is become much more sophisticated. But at the outset, and bear in mind, 5-FU is used by people with breast cancer, FOLFOX, FOLFIRI, goodness knows how many, FOLFIRINOX for pancreatic cancer. So colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and pancreatic are still using 5-FU. It's a 1956 drug. And in attacking fast, quick dividing cells, it attacks your good cells as well. So that was the kind of start of all this. And a lot of the chemo prior to, I don't know, 2000, it was chemo and it was bog standard, and that's what it did. It was toxic to rapidly divided cells and hopefully more cancer cells than healthy cells. But then what happened with things like temozolomide for brain tumors in 1986, you got a drug designed to attack methylation in brain tumors. And then in about 2006, you got HER2 cancers being attacked by Herceptin. So they made too much HER2 protein, and then you had Herceptin come along to deal with it. And now we've evolved. We've got lots more of these monoclonal antibodies, as they're called. And we've gone on to get tyrosine kinase inhibitors. And, you know, it goes on. And then we've got immunotherapy and so on. And what's actually happened, just to confuse everybody, is the drug companies got fed up with, if you like, group 2 and group 3 monoclonal antibodies, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, all the clever ones, being called chemo, when they're actually, you know, monoclonal antibodies or something like that. So your oncologist, and I had it 3 times last week, may well call them immunotherapy when they're not. So you've got this chemo, toxic chemicals, and it could be a plant. You know, it can be some plants have chemo prevention capabilities. But then you've got this whole group in the middle under 3 or 4 headings that are not theoretically chemo and not theoretically immunotherapy, but called immunotherapy. And then finally got the immunotherapy drugs, the new boys coming in on the end. The one point I would make to everybody is when I wrote the first edition, and I checked it, the first edition of Everything You Need to Know, I said in it, Brave New World is coming, and we're going to have all these clever drugs and everything else, and the side effects are going to get reduced. They are not. I mean, tyrosine kinase inhibitors can do some very nasty things, as can the palbociclibs of this world and so on. So it's not kind of gone to plan, I don't think, really.
Wow. And just one more on the similar subject from Sonia Graves. She said, "I hear people having 40+ rounds of chemo. Why so many?"
Well, okay. What normally happens, again, it comes down to the drugs. And if you start off, you know, you say you got breast cancer, and I never quite understand this, but they knock it back. They give you 6 rounds of drugs. They knock it back. Then they give you the surgery, and then they give you some more drugs to mop it all up, perhaps, and they give you some radiotherapy. And that's all defined. They've got protocols. But nowadays, what happens is they've got new drugs, and I'm going to get this wrong. I apologize. They've got, I think it's called CD something or other, K4/6. And it's a whole raft of drugs, palbociclib, ribociclib, et cetera, and they've no idea how long they're going to work for. So I've had people who've had the drug and they've been on it for a couple of years, no problems, no side effects. It's working, wonderful. I've had other people who couldn't tolerate it after 6 weeks. And I've had other people who literally it stopped working after 3 or 4 months. So they're the people who are on it until it stops working. And this was part of the grand plan when I first wrote Everything You Need to Know. You're going to get, I think it was MD Anderson said, what we're going to do is we're going to give you the chemos and everything else, and then we'll give you a drug that attacks whatever this mutation is, and that will last 2 or 3 years. And we'll give you another drug that attacks another mutation and so on, and that will go on for as long as it lasts and so on. And that was the grand plan from MD Anderson. And they made this one comment, which comes back to my earlier point. They said, as long as the person's body can take them. I think this is a big issue, because chemo, as we know, damages your white cells, damages your cells, but it damages your microbiome. And that's a longer term issue. So, you know, there's short term effects, and no one I can see in authority is looking at the longer term issues. What happens when you screw your microbiome completely?
Wow, that's scary.
Okay, so I hope that's the answer to the question.
Well, yeah, that's scary. That's what
I think it is scary. I think it is scary. This brave new world hasn't happened. No. And, you know, I think there's a question about tyrosine kinase inhibitors later on. Horrible things.
Okay, Jane Seagrove writes and asked, I've been on Taxol and carboplatin for ovarian cancer and they flattened me. I'm constantly tired of tingly fingers. I'm so scared of neuropathy. Any ideas, please?
Well, if you've got tingly fingers, you're on the way. So you've got to do something fast. There are 2 compounds that I could just name. Alpha lipoic acid. Alpha lipoic acid, funnily enough, I'm covering it in next week's e-news. Alpha lipoic acid has effects in diabetes. It has effects in neuropathy. It actually improves the connections in your nervous system and so on. But it also is quite good for fatigue. Possibly better for fatigue is acetyl L-carnosine. And this is the sort of funny one, because I saw it. I think I was watching television and the Olympics were on, and someone said, well, after a race, you know, they've done their 10,000 meters, they take acetyl L-carnosine and it gets your fatigue, you know, over and done with. You pick yourself up very quickly. And I went to an article, I remember 2 Italian doctors wrote about it, and I found it was 2012. And they had said it was really good for chemo fatigue, and it also stopped neuropathy. And I went and checked neuropathy. I put neuropathy into the Google search, and acetyl L-carnosine, it lit up again. Diabetics get neuropathy. And so there you go. Both drugs good for diabetics, but they're also good for cancer patients who've got tingly fingers and are tired.
Just name those again for people, Chris.
I'm sorry, you're quiet.
Just name those 2 drugs again.
All right. Alpha lipoic acid and acetyl L-carnosine.
You can buy those over the counter?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think you probably have to get them from a supplement shop. I'm sure Natural Selection will have them.
Okay. Sylvia Reynolds asks, I'm about to take Ibrance, palbociclib, whatever, and I've been told not to take turmeric and milk thistle. Is this correct?
No, it's not. Right, palbociclib is what I was talking about. I love it because all these drugs have got really complicated names. That's yeah, but they've also all got really easy names, so I call it Ibrance. And we've had this loads of times. Now I'm going to say something which is upsetting. As you know, we've had a really good relationship with Macmillan for ages. Well, Macmillan nurses have been told, I have it on good authority, that when they are asked now about supplements and a drug, they are to say, we do not have enough research on this drug with any supplements, therefore it's better not to take any. Okay, so that's one little problem we have. Secondly, yes, we do get people told, whatever, you know, you must not take turmeric on with Ibrance, and the other one, milk thistle, and there's about 3 or 4 others. Fish oils was the other one, and I found a bit odd. Anyway, bottom line is, it's not true. When I was talking to Robert Thomas and interviewing him, Professor Robert Thomas, the other week, he said to me, did you know, Chris, he said, I've done loads of research now on turmeric. It makes drugs work better. Well, it does, because we've got that on the website too. So we know that turmeric actually makes drugs work better, because cancer cells, this is the thing about chemo, cancer cells are different. They have a different metabolic approach to how they get their energy and everything else than a normal healthy cell. So just because something protects, say, a healthy cell, doesn't mean you can say it's going to protect a cancer cell. So this whole idea that you mustn't take antioxidants with the new drugs is completely wrong. It wasn't even that right when it was chemotherapy. But we also, so I went and looked up about half a dozen drugs and Ibrance, just not true. Just not true. Nowhere can you see that these drugs clash. But we have a lady on forum. I think she's in Canada. I think her name's June. Can't remember. And she answered one of the questions, and she said, I'm on palbociclib. And I went to the oncologist who said, no, you can't take turmeric, milk thistle, whatever. And she said, and I went to the chemist in the hospital, and he said, no, you can't take all those things. And she said, I couldn't understand why. So I rang Pfizer, who make it. And they said, no, it's perfectly okay. You can take them. And I can understand concerns about chemo, but not some of these clever drugs. These clever drugs just wouldn't interact with turmeric like they're making out. Okay, so there you go. No, it's perfectly safe.
You've been saying how turmeric improves drugs for years, haven't you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you know, I always make a joke that a cancer cell versus a healthy cell, it's not like apples and oranges. It's apples and alligators. I mean, they're completely different. Anybody who's done a biochemistry course will tell you cancer cells got nothing to do with a healthy cell. And actually, this is the whole basis of the pharmaceutical industry. They know it's got nothing to do with it. So why would something that works on your healthy cell to boost you and whatever work on a cancer cell? I mean, some do. So you got to be careful of some things, but not everything. Okay.
Okay. Jim Rawlings writes in, I have a brain tumor and I'm methylating. I'm about to take temozolomide and I have simultaneous radiotherapy. In one of your articles, you suggested taking berberine. Why?
Okay. Lots of reasons. Number one, brain tumors are, well, your brain is poisoned by sugar. So we know for a fact that kids get more epilepsy. And when you take their sugar away from them, lo and behold, they go from 26 fits a day to 1 every 3 weeks. So we know sugar poisons brains. We know that people with the highest levels of blood sugar when they're older get more dementia. So it's not even an issue here. Now, we also know that brain tumors feed on sugar. Okay, so it's well documented, and you get people like Thomas Seyfried, ketogenic diet guy, literally standing up at the conference I was at talking about it, you know, how sugar feeds brain tumors. So that's the first point. Berberine, like metformin, cuts blood sugar. That's one of the big things it does. And berberine we use because there is research with temozolomide that it extends its life. It actually makes it work longer, and it makes it work a bit more effectively. Let me explain something to the listeners. Temozolomide is like Herceptin in a way. It only works on 20% of the target. So temozolomide only works if you're methylating, just like Herceptin only works if you've got 20%, if you're one of the 20% of women who's got HER2. So only 20% are methylating. Catherine, for example, wasn't, but she was still given temozolomide. Everybody is given temozolomide. Now, what we do know, which is weird, is that 20% can become 30 or 35% if you take something like metformin or berberine. And berberine also seems, because Jim, will get temozolomide again. Berberine will make it work longer in the second round when they keep it running, just as that lady asked. They keep it running until it stops working. So it can do that. But the big thing about berberine over metformin is that, number one, berberine does other things. So it attacks cancer cells. It actually attacks microbes. And it's very anti-inflammatory. Metformin certainly is. But secondly, berberine has lots of research, not 1 or 2 studies, that it is a chemosensitizer and it is a radiosensitizer. Now, in your first round of temozolomide, they will give you chemotherapy and radiotherapy at the same time, right? That's to make the chemo work better, believe it or not, it is. And berberine is perfect for that because it's going to make both of them work better.
Is it okay to take metformin and berberine?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think the answer to that is yes. We don't have lots of research because when it comes to researching something like berberine, funnily enough, it's the Chinese now. Anything to do with herbs, Chinese are spending lots of money on working it out. And there is research on brain tumors using metformin and berberine simultaneously. And there is research on pancreatic cancer, but I don't know of any other. But, you know, once you've got 2 or 3 studies on different cancers, it's probably true for most cancers.
Yeah.
Okay. You're trying to get your blood sugar down below 4. It's not the same. If you went to the doctor or I went to the doctor in Britain, they would want us to be below 7 because above 7, you're likely to be diabetic. So if you're 4, 5, 6, they're going to go, oh, you're fine. But you're not. Not for cancer. You want to be below 4. Fasting blood sugar be below 4. Thomas Seyfried told me that cancer couldn't feed below 4.
Right. Susie Whitehead asked, Jane McClellan talks in her book Starving Cancer about taking Hanokiol and lung cancer drugs. Can it really improve the Avastin?
Am I allowed to laugh?
Yeah.
Jane McClellan tells you that because I told her that. Right? It's very simple. So Jane McClellan talks about loratadine. Jane McClellan talks about Hanokiol because that's what I told her to do. Hanokiol is a traditional Chinese herb. It comes from the magnolia bush. The best Hanokiols have got magnol in them. And there are about 20 centers in the West who are all doing research on this, so you don't have to rely on the Chinese. And every one of them's done the animals and the test tubes, and 3 of them are saying this stuff works, it's fantastic, we've got to do human clinical trials. Works, what does works mean? It actually attacks cancer cells in the bloodstream and in the lymph, and it knocks them out. It reduces them. And there's particularly research on lung cancer. And so if someone's having Avastin, it's an EGFR inhibitor. I would hope that Hanokiol, and we use it with dandelion before bed. We use 400 milligrams of Hanokiol before bed with 1,500 milligrams of dandelion. So they work really well together. We use it before bed. I would hope that it would make Avastin's job easier. That's what I'd be looking to do. What does make Avastin's job easier is actually understanding that there's a crosstalk between the EGFR receptor and the estrogen receptor. I know I'm getting complicated now, but anybody who comes to me for a PP and they've got EGFR and they're going to go on Avastin, we would cut their estrogen. That's what we would do. And that gets much, much better results with lung cancer treatment. You remember that old lady I had on? I can't remember what her name was now, about a year ago, who literally had been given 4 months to live, 3 months to live. Yeah. And she was, I can't remember her name. When I asked her the first question, it turned out she was deaf. So she didn't hear the question. But, you know, she was given Avastin, 3 months to live. We'll see what happens. And I cut her estrogen at the same time. That's one of the big things that I did. Yeah, everybody's different. I build programs for the issue right in front of me at the time. And so Avastin, I would always use something to cut the estrogen. But the question was, taking Hanokiol with lung cancer drugs, can they really improve Avastin? I would hope so, yes.
Eva Rosenfields asks, I've been reading that we should take 180 milligrams melatonin to improve letrozole hormone therapy for breast cancer. Is that right? I
tell you what, it's a diverse bunch of questions, aren't they?
Oh,
right. It's amazing. Okay, melatonin. We use melatonin. When someone's having chemo, we use melatonin. Melatonin, like berberine, like turmeric, are their chemo they're cancer cell sensitizers. So it makes the job easier for chemo. So that's what we're trying to do. So the question was, we should be taking 180 milligrams of melatonin to improve letrozole hormone therapy. Letrozole, of course, isn't a chemo or anything like that. Letrozole blocks aromatase enzymes. Okay, so in women, you have ovaries, and those ovaries produce estradiol and estrone. And basically, when you go through menopause, everybody assumes estradiol and estrone go down to 0. They don't, they go down to about 35%. And what happens then is you start, if you're over the age of 50, you start to make estradiol, which is the dangerous estrogen, in your fat stores. And basically you use aromatase enzymes to do it. And when you make lots of estradiol, it can sit on your receptor sites and create havoc inside your cells. And this results in breast cancer and worse. Now, 10% is still made in your adrenals, 35% still made in your ovaries. So work it out, 55% is made in your fat stores. So they give you letrozole. Now, it's very interesting because you may remember 2 years ago when I did my speech, I got questioned on tamoxifen and letrozole. And I thought it was going to be controversial. So how effective, Chris, is tamoxifen? 3 to 5%. How effective is letrozole? And I said 13 to 15. Well, Robert Thomas didn't even say that 4 weeks ago on the show. He said 9 to 11. And I'm not surprised because only 55% of your estradiol, which is the dangerous female hormone, is being made that way. The rest is made in your ovaries and adrenals. So when anybody comes to me, I block their estrogen. I don't risk using the drugs. Okay, we do the drugs if that's what you want, but we do other things. And yes, we take melatonin. And the traditional dose of melatonin is 20 milligrams. So we know, for example, anybody with disturbed sleep patterns makes less melatonin. Long-haul air hostesses, night shift workers, nurses, just had one yesterday in Australia. And they make less melatonin, and as a result, their estrogen comes out of control because melatonin controls your estrogen. Also, if you're in a situation where you have lots of Wi-Fi around you, that will damage your melatonin and you'll have higher estrogen. So what actually happens is we give people a dose of 20 milligrams of melatonin at the same time they're having their estrogen and their letrozole and things like that. And 20 milligrams is the research dose, but 20 milligrams is what Sloan Kettering say, and it's also what the National Cancer Institute say. Now, I did a speech with Professor Russell Rita, and he is a wonderful Texan. Oh, you can do the accent better than me. And he was talking about melatonin. He is the guy doing 180 milligrams a day, and he's giving people 60 milligrams 3 times a day during light hours, and they're not going to sleep. You see, I think melatonin is the healing drug. It's a huge antioxidant and a huge anti-inflammatory. So the question is about taking 180 milligrams. And what this refers to is Russell is trying to give people 180 milligrams. I don't think it's working at the moment, not from what I get, but there is research. There is research. And I think the research is something like, I'm going to say 2012. It might even be 2015. I can't remember. And it was a big study done on I don't know, 500,000 people, something like that. But it was done on a lot of different cancers. And to cut a long story short, they showed that if you took 100 milligrams before bed, and there's another pineal gland hormone, which you just took 10 grams off during the day. I don't think it really matters. But you took 100 milligrams of the melatonin before bed. 55% of the people made it to 5 years. And of those, 45 of the 55, if you see what I mean, so only 10% were left. So 10% still had an unstable cancer, but 45% of people had a stable cancer. So Russell's right. Russell Russell Reader loves melatonin to bits, and has spent his life on it, I think. And he's right too. There's definitely something in melatonin. It definitely makes chemo work better. It makes radiotherapy work better. And it also regulates your estrogen better than their drugs do. That's my view on it. And we've also, as I say, I don't know whether 180 milligrams works. And there's a lot of conflicting evidence about giving people doses in the middle of the day and things like this. It could be good or harmful. But certainly using 100 milligrams before bed, if you can get your hands on it, has got research that it makes cancer stable. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to say on it. So I don't know anymore.
That's a good place to stop. Anita Reynolds says, in your plan, I'm not quite sure where the question is here. In your plan for chemotherapy, you recommended I took melatonin, turmeric, berberine, and hinokiol.
Maybe the ink ran out on her Apple Mac. Yeah, I did. Okay, so we recommended acetyl L-carnitine now for lipoic acid too most of the time. Yes, I did, because as I say, when you're having chemo, let's say you're having FECT, for example, I'm not using them as an anti-estrogen drug or a sugar blocker or whatever. I'm using turmeric, berberine, and melatonin because they are chemosensitizers. All three of them make that cancer cell weaker. So when the drug comes into the body, the cancer drug kills more of them. That's all I'm trying to do, and it works. And then, we've got lots of research on it. And then the other one, hinokiol, we use at the same time because, and this is damning, I know, but we get people who come to me and they've had their 6 rounds of chemo, and at the end of it, the doctor said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but the tumor's got bigger." Well, I don't like that happening to my patients. So we try and stop it spreading as well. And we've got other things that stop it spreading. So yes, I do use those 4 compounds. We use turmeric 2 to 3 grams. We give people a lot of turmeric. We use berberine 3 lots of 500 milligrams. You can't use less. We take 500 milligrams breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We use melatonin 20 milligrams at night. And we use, as I said, hinokiol 400 milligrams at nighttime with dandelion, 1,500. And the idea is weaken those cancer cells and make the drug's job easier. We've had, as you may remember, the guy a few years ago coming to my show in Bracknell, standing up and telling everybody his prostate cancer had gone away from his bones and lymph. That's what I did. I put all this round dose of Taxol, and they got a result they'd never seen before in the hospital.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
Not rocket science. You can read. Keep telling people you just got to read.
Yeah. Okay, Pat Goodacre. I'm quite impressed now because I can pronounce these two. Pat Goodacre is asking about fasting and chemotherapy. She said, I'm on epiributine and cyclophosphamide, and thus far, cycle 2 have tried fasting 22 hours before chemo till about 16 hours after. What would the optimal be, and what do you think?
Okay, there is no doubt in my mind that fasting improves chemotherapy. Okay, I'll be unequivocal about that. You just got to get it right. Now, the expert on fasting, I think I've done this on other shows, the expert on fasting is Walter Longo. And there are 2 sorts of fasting, okay? There's time-restricted fasting when you pack in at about 6 o'clock at night and you start eating again at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's time-restricted fasting. The idea is you eat 2/3 of the calories you were eating, and therefore it's a weight loss program. And it does have benefits. Your sugar comes down, your insulin comes down, and your cholesterol comes down a bit. And Dr. McCullough was saying Walter Longo really rates it. It's called intermittent fasting. No, it's not. It's called time-restricted fasting. It's got nothing to do with anything else I'm going to talk about today. So that's time-restricted fasting. You want to lose weight? That's what you do. Intermittent fasting, Walter Longo, is where you do 5 days on, 2 days off, 10 days on, 3 days off. Walter Longo says, if you want to be healthier, you do 25 days on and take 5 days off of fast. And he's done work with longer periods of time for people with cancer, and he's shown that cancer stops progressing. Okay, and your immune system reboots. But here we're just talking about chemo. That's the subject today. And Longo talks about you having 2 full days, and then you doing your chemo on the 3rd day, and you stopping halfway through the 4th day. Okay, far be it from me to criticize Professor, but I don't think you need to do it that long. So if you're going to have your chemo on Monday sometime, I would start you at 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. Now you're on water and green tea, but if you get really hungry, you could do green vegetable juices or something like that. Don't have any carbohydrates in it, but if you want to fill yourself up with sort of green juice, that's fine, vegetables. But basically what happens is 24 hours after you start fasting, your brain goes, oh, goodness me, we're in trouble, and produces a hormone called sirtuin-1. And sirtuin-1 is fantastic. It is the longevity hormone. And Walter Longo is the professor of longevity. That's what his special field is. And we know that Norwegians, Belgians, whatever, in the war, they had the healthiest times of their lives, even though they couldn't have much food. And so we know it's all about fasting. Fasting, rats, if they fast, take 20% less than they need, they live at the equivalent of 130 years of our lives. So we know what fasting does, and this is all to do with sirtuin-1, which you can actually help produce with resveratrol, believe it or not. Anyway, back to the story. So then what happens is, so Sunday evening at 6, you're now making sirtuin-1, and over the next 12, 15 hours, it shuts down your healthy cells. It's like, my analogy is, it's like putting your TV on standby. And it does that because it doesn't want the healthy cells damaging themselves. It's a health hormone, but it has no effect on the cancer cells. And so what happens is, on the Monday, when you have your IV, you inject it, it's injected into your body. It's got to be IV. It can't be pills across a 2-week period. But you have your IV, the IV comes into your body, and it's not picked up by your healthy cells, and there's more drug available for your cancer cells. So it's win-win. And I think the minimum you have to do is that sort of 24 hours plus the overnight until your IV comes into your body. And then you come out of it about lunchtime the next day. Again, you may remember, anybody who's a member of Cancer Active Community couldn't go and watch the film, but when I interviewed Tabs Headington, she was like 16, 17, 18, I can't remember, but she forgot what I told her. And she went to an Ayurvedic doctor who said, no, Chris Woollams is absolutely right, do it. And she did it for rounds 2, 3, and 4. And she said the difference was phenomenal. We get people writing in saying, I sailed through my chemo. It makes a big difference. So that's the time frame, 6 o'clock Saturday evening, come out of it halfway through Tuesday. So it's less than 3 days. It's what, six hours less than 3 days.
This is just a personal shock effect question from me. How do you fast for 25 days?
No, the 25 days you're allowed to eat. And
right.
And then Walter Longo's got this 5-day period, right? When he does now, and actually it's perfect for you, Larry. It's perfect because he's got the fasting mimicking diet. Now, I'm not going to say anything about Americans at this point, but obviously it's to make money. and so you can go and buy the bars and the soups and everything else, and this is what you eat for the 5 days. And it mimics a slightly ketone-based diet. So what you've got, you see, to talk about fasting, which we're not the subject today, but I will. What happens is, so 24 hours after you fast, you produce sirtuin-1. Also, about 24 hours after you fast, all your poor white cells die off. So you've lost a load of white cells, but they're all the rubbish ones. And your sugar comes down, your insulin comes down, and your cholesterol comes down a bit. But you're now approaching, by day 2, really low sugar, almost nil, and your insulin's right down. And so sirtuin-1 is taking over, but the body has to have some fuel. So you naturally make ketone bodies, day 2, day 3, day 4. And this is the 5-day fast. So you naturally make ketone bodies, which cancer cells can't use. Healthy cells can burn. You can make ketone bodies, by the way, from anything. You could make them from olive oil or whatever. And so for 5 days, your cancer can't feed, so progression stops. And when you start to eat again, you reboot your healthy cells and your white cells. That's what happens. You put your white cells back up again. And Longo knows that a part of this is ketosis, and therefore he's built a fasting mimicking diet using fats, basically. Okay. Right. It's all on the Rainbow Diet website, fasting mimicking diet. Your Kiddie's Guide to the Fasting Mimicking Diet. I'll do an e-news with it in.
Sleepy John, great name. Sleepy John says, I'm a 79-year-old guy with chronic 3-year-old chemo side effects, already on multiple prescribed herbals to control NHL, needing long-term relief from chemo slowdown, cognitive and memory degradation, herbals rather than pharma. Can you help?
Yeah. If I were you, I would reboot myself. Obviously, this is a big generalization now. I haven't got him in front of me. I haven't read everything. So it's not how I like to work. But I would reboot myself. As long as he hasn't got anything wrong with his lungs, I would ring up the Multiple Sclerosis Society and say, where's the nearest hyperbaric oxygen chamber to me? And I'd go and have some. That's where I would start. And as he gets more oxygen inside him, he's more likely to be able to do more exercise, and that will keep the reboot going there. I would also take some oregano oil. I would suggest that he took 180 milligrams of oregano first thing in the morning and last thing at night. I think what I would do with him, again, not knowing him, but I think I might use artemisinin. I might do 7 days of oregano, 7 days of artemisinin. Artemisinin would be 300 milligrams at night time for him. I don't know whether he's got a fatty liver or not. And repeat. So 7 days oregano, 7 days artemisinin, 7 days oregano, whatever. And I would probably do that 6, 8 times, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. And that will kill off all his yeast, and it will kill off any other nasty around. Not any other nasty, but E. coli, maybe even Borrelia burgdorferi, Lyme disease, or anything like that. I don't know what else he's got going on. So I would do that, and I'd go back to where we started the program. I would take acetyl L-carnitine. I think one other thing he might do, since he's 79, is, I don't know, you're saying your brain's a little bit impaired. Acetyl L-carnitine will help foggy brains. That's one of the things it does. But I think I would take resveratrol, or resveratrol, however you want to say it. We know that if you've got a foggy brain to the point where you're frightened you're getting dementia, resveratrol, I talked how you can stimulate sirtuin-1. So resveratrol at the level of about 750 milligrams, plus coenzyme Q10, because coenzyme Q10 makes it work better, actually can reverse the early stages of dementia. But I would also use things like a probiotic, and I would use apple cider vinegar because I'd want to boost his bugs. So they are, it's top of the head. Don't know him, so it might be dangerous what I said, but I think I've been safe. I was very surprised. I went to Jane and her shop for sort of 60 or is it 100 milligram resveratrols, and I asked her if she had a high dose resveratrol, because I'd just done an article about Alzheimer's, and my dad had Alzheimer's, and it's not much more expensive. I was really surprised. So guess who takes high dose resveratrol?
Okay, this question I think is longer probably than the answer. Kevlin says, you do not mention Bruton's tyrosine kinase inhibitors in the list of treatments you mentioned. There are many of us with blood cancers and high lymphoma that are currently taking these drugs on a daily basis. I myself have been on ibrutinib for 1 year, and with a very positive outcome with regards to my CLL cancer, but with many awful side effects. I had athromycin for COVID. It prevented the virus. Now I want to rebuild my gut, but the herbs are banned. I'd appreciate your comments, Chris. Hell of a question.
Yes. Could get a long answer as well. Tyrosine kinase inhibitors, right? Cancer, all cancer cells pretty well have got tyrosine kinase as part of the whole process, the energy process. And drug companies, being drug companies, have created a tyrosine kinase inhibitor for each cancer. So, you know, if you've got 4 companies and 20 cancers, you've got 80 of them out there.
Yeah.
So they're all doing roughly the same job. And as I said in the preamble, some of them can be very dodgy, I think. And here we are talking about ibrutinib. You have to say it as if you're French. Ibrutinib, okay?
Okay.
Not a problem. And what you say, and basically, it's got unbelievable side effects. So I sympathize with Kunderki enormously. And the list goes on for a page and a half, I think, on the web. So that's the background to these drugs. It's used for lymphoma. It's used for leukemia, CLL, lymphocytic leukemia. This is an interesting one, you see, because you mentioned turmeric and things like this. I looked it up for somebody, and they say that it's got a blood thinning effect equivalent to a 325 milligram aspirin. And that's what we're talking about here. Most pharmacists worry about your red blood cells and your white blood cells. That's what they're really interested in. They're worrying about those because if they go too low, your platelets go down and whatever, they're worried that you're going to bleed to death on them. And if your red cells go down, they're worried that's the end, kind of thing. You know, that's what they worry about. And if your white cells and red cells are down, they can't give you any more drugs. So it's a sort of self-fulfilling thing. So they want those up. They're worried about how ill you are. Okay, I'm not. I'm worried about how well people are, but they're worried about how ill you are. So when this drug works like an aspirin, they are going to say to you, oh, well, you mustn't take any blood thinners. So that's turmeric gone. That's fish oils gone, echinacea, and so on. Okay. But the other side of it, I wouldn't want to kill anybody, but the other side of it is only a 325 milligram aspirin. It's not, you know, a really big one, 500 or something like that. So it's slightly less serious than it sounds at first light. I did look the drug up. Okay. And number one, like a lot of drugs now, you can't go in the sun because it mucks up your melatonin levels. It also creates big gut issues, which is where I think all the side effects come from. Because if you wreck your gut, then you're going to get lots of side effects. And classically, it says mouth ulcers, bleeding, low platelets, rash, pneumonia, sinusitis, and it goes on. I mean, they're the top 6. So yes, I would be worried from where I am about using turmeric and other things. I can't see why you couldn't use oregano oil. Oregano oil, mouth ulcers are a classic sign of yeast. This is a dreadful drug and it's really hit your gut. So I'd use the yeast killer, oregano oil, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, 180 mg. What I did do, which was interesting for me, I looked it up on the manufacturer's site and I looked it up on Tom Henry's site. Now, you don't know who Tom Henry is, but he's a pharmacist, works in the drug industry, and he has CLL, and he takes the drug. And he said, and I would agree with this, he said, number one, do not touch grapefruit or grapefruit juice or big Seville oranges. Okay. Number two, and I wonder if your oncologist has told you this, Kunderki, you mustn't have dexamethasone or other steroids. You mustn't have certain antibiotics. You mustn't have certain antidepressants. Now, hang on, didn't you take, wasn't it an antibiotic you took, or was it azithromycin?
Yep.
Good doctor, isn't it? It's a good doctor in Britain using azithromycin to stop COVID. So hang on, it's the bigger list from Tom Henry is drugs than herbs and things like that. In fact, he says, and no blood thinners like fish oils, turmeric, but the only herb he mentions in his whole piece, which is a really good article, is St. John's wort, which I never use anyway. So I'd start gingerly, and I might use oregano oil, and I might use apple cider vinegar to get some bugs in there, and I might use acetyl L-carnosine just get my energy levels up. But recognize this drug is laying waste to your gut from where everything else flows in this drug's case. But I agree, it's a pretty nasty drug. Sorry.
Okay. Roberto Yeep asks, I'm on Gabazorexel chemotherapy treatment. The side effects started to kick in. Can you cover this?
Yeah, the answer to that is I can't find the drug anywhere on the web. Just I don't know what drug you're on. I've no idea. I can't find it. It's Uncle Google, Uncle Wikipedia. Nobody's got it on there. So I would just say, to be safe, avoid grapefruit, and I would do some of the things we've said earlier on. I would make sure, everybody listening to this ought to be taking vitamin D3, K2. Why? K2 makes your drugs work longer. K2 makes your drugs work more effectively. K2 helps vitamin D work. K2 protects your bones. It protects your liver. So it does all the things you really want protecting. So I would do that. I would take magnesium because drugs lower your magnesium, even Kundurki as well. So take magnesium. We always give it to people on chemo. Why? Because chemo drugs lower your magnesium level. Magnesium's involved in about 300 reactions in the body, but magnesium is crucial to your liver. Why do so many cancers go to the liver? Because people have got no magnesium in them. It's not rocket science. Then I take oregano oil. I think I'll go back to acetyl L-carnosine. I might do a bit of fasting even and get my oxygen up with hyperbaric oxygen. But again, I'm a little bit shooting in the dark, so I don't know what the drug is.
It would help, wouldn't it? It would
But
help.
I wondered if it was Gosrelin, which is Zoladex. I don't know really. Roberto Yeep. Perhaps I should have looked it up in Italian. I should use an Italian with a name like Roberto.
Alison Hall asks, maybe it's the Ibrance, but I seem to lose my appetite a lot of the time, and I only eat soups and liquids. What can I do? What can I add in for these times to keep my weight up, please?
Well, it's the same thing coming up again, you see, because what's happening is the Ibrance is laying waste to your gut microbiome. And, because your good guys are going down, your bad guys are coming out to play, there's a war going on in there. They're not bothered about your food. They're worried about fighting each other. I know it's a kind of simplistic way of looking at it, but that's what's going on. And so I would be inclined to start on your how do I eat more and put weight back on? I start off with the simple things. I might take pancreatic digestive enzymes. I think for a quick fix, like I was saying earlier on, I would probably rotate oregano oil with artemisinin and just try and knock the bad guys back, stop the fight going on. And I would chuck good bugs down my throat, even though I know I'm to a degree wasting them, because obviously Ibrance is having a strong effect on you. Ibrance is one of those drugs where it can have a really strong effect on this lady, but none on that. It's a really weird drug. Yeah. So I would be taking apple cider vinegar, probiotic, and some sauerkraut in the juices and so on. But I think you've just got to try and fix the basics and get your oxygen up. And just remember, if you really don't feel like eating, better to eat some good fats. And so olive oil, fish oils, oily fish, avocados, nuts and seeds if you can, because 1 gram of fat is 4 times the calories of 1 gram of carbohydrate. So it's a difficult one. I mean, It's not a simple fix like, why don't you eat these foods? It's because it's all coming from there. And this lot don't want you eating. That's what it is. They're sending chemicals to your brain saying, don't bother me.
Okay, Tracy Germain is on Zoladex hormone injections, and she wants to know how to improve her bone pain after 18 months. This is stopping me exercising now and gain weight. Or could myomin be an alternative to regulate estrogen?
Okay, let's do it a bit at a time. Zoladex has a side effect. It puts your fat up. So I'm actually amazed that is she saying no? She's not saying she loses weight. No, she said weight gain. She wants weight gain. I'm amazed. Most people, most women on Zoladex actually moan because they're putting on weight. So I'm very surprised about that. It puts your blood fat up. It's a real problem we have with men because fat drives prostate cancer. And as you know, when I talk to people about prostate cancer, I talk about this triangle, which is diet, vigorous exercise, and fat control. That's how you beat. You know, if I could summarize how to beat prostate cancer in one, minute, it's that. That's what we do. And Zoladex goes and works against us. So I'm a bit surprised on that. Bone pain. Well, you got to be very careful because obviously with the Zoladex, and maybe you're on letrozole as well or something like that, they're trying to block your estrogen. And I did a whole number on, I think, on one of these shows about letrozole and anastrozole blocking your estrogen and bones. And we do know, of course, that letrozole and anastrozole can cause hot flushes, and they cause bone pain, and they can damage your bone. And it's a sort of fiddle because when I looked at all the research to write the article, they only measure it after a year, and they say things like, there's no bone problem at all. It just puts a couple of markers down, but it's fine. But then, of course, they give you bisphosphonates, and the whole thing multiplies up, gets worse. And at 5 years, your bones can start cracking from those two drugs. So the one that's supposed to be helping you actually makes matters worse. And we've got chapter and verse on it on the site. Now, I went to American Bone Health. I was doing with Ben the thing on vitamin D, and I knew I was going to get asked this because people take Calcichew or Adcal, and it's a bloody great lump of chalk with a titchy little bit of vitamin D in it. And you go to American Bone Health, which is a government website. So let's not argue, okay? It's a government website. And it says very clearly, if you want to prevent bone pain and pending osteoarthritis or osteopenia or whatever, you name it, you need to take 2,500 international units of vitamin D3 K2 a day. It talks about K2 on another page, but that's what it's saying. So that's in the American Bone Health thing. Doctors are giving you 400. So number one, you've got to have that sort of level. Number two, it tells you to take 350, 400 mg of magnesium. Number three, it tells you to take a total calcium of 1,500 milligrams. Well, that's only a couple of helpings of greens. It's not that much. You can get almost a gram of calcium out of a big helping of spinach. Now, what this is all about, this is what I'm worried about, see, with her, is that if she's trying to make sure she has good bone health, then obviously the letrozole bisphosphonates may even be working against her. I mean, I'm serious, bisphosphonates work a certain way. The best way to have bone health is to take 5,000 international units of vitamin D3 with K2 in it, take 300 to 500 milligrams of magnesium, take boron, take a couple of helpings of lentils a week for phosphorus and so on. I tell you what, get a trace mineral. You can get little drops of trace mineral and put that in your juice, because you need lots of different minerals, not just calcium. Calcium must have vitamin D, magnesium, potassium, and a little bit of boron and other things to get into the bones. It's never going to go by giving you a big lump of calcium and a titchy little bit of vitamin D. That's just nonsense. This is one of the reasons I think people have bone problems, because I don't think oncologists understand bone health. So bottom line, I'm not too sure which question we answered first, but how to improve bone pain. I think she's got bone pain because her bones are going wrong. And so I'd be very wary of the bisphosphonates and so on. And I would be doing everything in my power to have strong bones. This is stopping me exercising now. Well, that's really worrying because it doesn't sound like bone pain to me. It sounds like something worse. If she wants to regulate estrogen, yes, we talk about green juices, eating greens and beans. You could take red clover, you can take indole-3 carbinol, you can take melatonin, and you can take myomin. And one of my famous ladies in America, I've got about 3 now, is doing exactly that. And she's literally survived about 4.5 years more than that she was given by, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Harvard or someone. So I go back to the letrozole. It's a slightly dodgy drug, and it doesn't work that well. If you go on the web, it says it reduces estrogen by 98%. I don't believe it. It must be a drug company piece of research. I mean, Robert Thomas and I both think the effectiveness is between 9 and 15%, and I'm thinking higher than him. He's the professor. So it's a decision I can't make. Only Tracy can make it, and I certainly would be thinking, if she was sitting in front of me, of discussing cutting her drugs and giving her lots of anti-estrogens and focusing totally on bone health. That's controversial, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. That should wake a few people up. Andrea Tellman says, when I had my personal prescription with you, Chris, you were concerned about a supplement containing iron I was taking. Could you explain the connection between cancer and iron and explain how to handle a low iron blood count safely?
Okay. There are 2 professors in Seattle and a doctor in Seattle and at Washington State University, and they've built an artemisinin protocol. And artemisinin works really, really well with alpha lipoic acid, funny enough, but also with iron. And these guys have looked into iron in great detail. So I'm going to quote what they say. Dr. Singh, one of them, has got round the patent, I think, that they had on this. They were binding ferritin to iron and using it to kill cancer cells. He's got around the patent, and at the outset when he started, he was giving people a plant-based diet, and he was giving people a teaspoon of Floridix, which you can buy in the high street tomorrow. It's in Britain, it's in America, and so it's a plant-based iron. And Singh talks about giving people artemisinin before bed, along with a gram of vitamin C. And what he says is this, that when you take a plant-based iron supplement, Floridix, or you just eat plants, you are getting ferric iron. And cancer cells do not like ferric iron. Don't take it in. But what you have on the outside of cancer cells is loads of little sort of doorbells. And the vitamin C before bed, that's when your immune system's lowest. That's when cancer cells are feeding. And the doorbells, they're more like sensors, actually. The vitamin C turns the ferric iron into ferrous iron. And that's the favorite food of cancer cells. So when it touches the receptor, the door's all open. So the ferrous goes in and the artemisinin goes with it. And it kills lots of cancer cells. And they say it kills 30,000 cancer cells for every one you would do if you just took artemisinin. But that sounds like I'm digressing, and I probably am. So you've got ferric iron, which is plant iron, which is not a problem. You've got ferrous iron, which cancer cells love. And when you come to getting iron, if you eat a steak, you're going to get a sudden rush of iron. If you eat a mineral, a lump of rock, you're going to get a very slow release iron. Always, always the best iron is for your body is to have plant iron, always. So if you're going to supplement, it will be Floridix. It will be a plant iron. Okay, answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Um, Tina Fox says, my secondary was stable until a scan showed it had moved to my liver. I had radiotherapy and recently finished a course of paclitaxel,
That's all for you.
carboplatin, and Herceptin. In a few weeks, I'm starting on a new drug called Enhertu, which is trastuzumab deruxtecan. What question have you heard of this drug, and what are your thoughts on how I can make it effective? Do you know of it?
Well, we've covered it. I covered it years ago. I covered it when it was merely a glimmer in a pharmacist's eye. And it's on the website. And what it is, he says from memory, is you are taking, right, you're taking Herceptin. Herceptin goes into the body and targets HER2 protein. So let's be simplistic and say your cancer is making a protein called HER2. Herceptin goes in, sticks to it. So what they've decided to do is bind a toxic compound to the Herceptin so that it carries it into the body. And then when it sticks the HER2, the toxic compound kills it, blows it up. Okay, that's my understanding of it. But I'm pretty sure we covered it about 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's finally made it to what are they? They're using the ruxtecan. I've never heard of it. So my question is, have you heard of this drug? Yes. And what are your thoughts, and how could I can make it more effective? Okay. Ready for this? There are ways you can make Herceptin more effective. Number one, take berberine. Very clear research. Berberine acts as a chemosensitizer. Berberine actually works really well on HER2 cancers and makes them more susceptible to HER2 or to Herceptin. Guess what I'm going to say next? Melatonin. Even though melatonin is supposedly the estrogen drug, no, melatonin makes HER2 cancers more susceptible to HER2 Herceptin. Then we've got, on the website, we've got another drug, which, look it up. It's on 2021's news. It'll be on the breast cancer latest news page as well. And I can't even remember it. It's called like XY95D/1. And it exists. And it's on the market. And some scientists in Singapore have shown that if you add it to Herceptin, it makes it work much, much longer. Okay, it's all there. And they're saying, why can't we use it? Because it exists, which is a good point, really. And so you can do that. And how can I make it more effective? That's what she asked. Yes, we have an article. And the first thing is figs, because figs contain something called sorrelin, and sorrelin makes it more effective. Then we have turmeric. Then we have vitamin D3. Then we have anthocyanins. I think it was in black rice, but it could be figs. It could be red cherries and things like that. So anthocyanins, make ratatouille, lots of it. And then finally, I can't remember. I know, beta glucans. Beta glucans are immune stimulating drugs, and there's very specific research with Herceptin and beta glucan against HER2 cancer. Is that an answer?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Chris, I have to say, this is why your knowledge is just unbelievable, and why people who have a PP with you gain such tremendous benefit. And anybody who's watching this and looking at this, and I'm not in the advertising business, but I'll tell you something. If it was my life, I would do everything I possibly could, and one of the things I'd have a PP with you. And I know you're booked up for goodness knows how long, but hey, you stagger me.
We got a chap this week from America, lovely, lovely bloke. And he came to me for prostate cancer. And I said, how'd you hear about me? He said, oh, you helped my son 6 years ago. I said, oh, is he? He said, fine. He had kidney cancer.
Yeah.
Said, fine, beating it. Well, you
Alison,
never, people who beat it don't tell me. I don't mind. I have no.
okay, yeah.
In fact, I jokingly say to some people at the end of PP when they've done a follow-up, I said, well, if I never see you again, I'm perfectly happy with it because it means you've beaten it.
Yeah.
You know, and because they never come back.
Getting to the last two questions, really. Alison Bevan says, I have a melanoma stage 3, and they're about to give me ipilimumab and nivolumab, 2 immunotherapy drugs. What can I do to get the best results? Sorry?
So if you're French, ipilimumab.
Ah, ipilimumab. Now I understand.
Hey, you got it, see?
Okay. What can I do to get the best results?
Right. Now, this is really interesting. Right, because I got fed up about 4 or 5 weeks ago and wrote a blog about this. And then almost immediately afterwards, I interviewed Robert Thomas, and he's about as fed up as I am. Really interesting. I'll keep him out of it so he doesn't get, disbarred or whatever doctors do. But I don't think oncologists in Britain got the first clue how to use these drugs. Okay, I'm serious. Some of them, yes, some of them do. I mean, I could name them on one hand, probably. And you've got 2 drugs there. How long we got?
We're over.
We're over already, are we? Basically, you've got PD-1 drugs, nivolumab, pembrolizumab. They unblock your T cells. And then you've got PD-L1 drugs, and they unblock a receptor. So your cancer cells have got receptors on them which get blocked. Okay, so if you can unblock the T cell and you can unblock this, then you get the T cells killing the cancer. That's what it's all about. And so what they do is they give you 1 of each at the outset for 3 months, 4 months. And then you go on to the PD-1 for a couple of years, or sometimes just as long as it runs. As long as it runs. It goes back to that very much earlier question. Okay, now, it's a slight side effect to putting these 2 drugs together. You can kill people, right? I'm serious. You can kill people. And so I had a lady who was very ill, had been very ill. They had to stop the drug, everything, the ipilimumab. It's the combination of the 2, because your immune system can't take it. There's your first clue. Your immune system can't take it. So the issue is, to the oncologist and the patient, what are you doing to get the immune system up before you take it? Now, this is the bit that drives me loopy. So I get ladies on carboplatin and Taxol, and then they get given Avastin with them, and then they get just the Avastin, and then some bright spark says, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll give you an immunotherapy. And you think, how's that going to work? Because you've got to, by definition, have lots and lots of T cells and to unblock, and then they can attack. And the only way you're going to get lots and lots of T cells is to have a really, really strong microbiome. Okay. And secondly, to have lots and lots of vitamin D. Now we know that because there's research. And as I said, I read. So we've got lots of research saying high fiber diets. Now, people who eat a high soluble fiber diet have better immune system because they have a better microbiome. We also know there's 5 studies that say take a probiotic. There's 1 study that says, not sure. Every oncologist knows about 1 study. Frightening. So probiotics, apple cider vinegar, whatever, get your gut up with lots of soluble fiber. And then you will have more T cells. But at the end of the day, you've got to arm your T cells. And so I'll keep it short. Your T cells are armed by vitamin D. And vitamin D is armed by a compound your gut bacteria make called butyrate. So what happens is you have loads of bugs that make your B vitamins and vitamin K and everything else, but you have 3 groups of superbugs, and they make short chain fatty acids. And one of those is butyrate. It's a super molecule. It does loads of things. It heals the gut wall. Okay, it colonizes bacteria in your body and things like that. Very anti-inflammatory. It attacks cancer cells in its own right. But one of the things it does, if you've got a gut wall and a gut lining, that's a big if you've been on all those drugs. Okay, so you got the sandwich. When the alarm bell goes, oh my goodness me, there's a cancer around or COVID, butyrate gets to work, the bugs make the butyrate gets to work, it activates your vitamin D. So all these people listening to the show, unless they saw me do it before, what happens is all that vitamin D you get from sunshine or you get out of pills is inactive in your body. And it's inactive because if you lay on a beach from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, you get 10,000 international units. It's a hormone and all your hormones will go out of whack. So your liver gets the job of deactivating your vitamin D. So all the vitamin D you spent all that lovely money on, it's actually inactive in your body. But they thought, you go to Uncle Google, you will see that your adrenals activate it. No, it's your gut bacteria. We now know that the bugs, these super bugs that make butyrate activates your vitamin D, sends it to your T cells that have got receptors, sends it to B cells that have got receptors, and they make your antibodies and they stop attack. So you've got to have lots of T cells, take probiotics, take lots of soluble fiber, make sure you've got lots of vitamin D and whatever, and make sure if you're worried that because you've been on chemo for ages, you might not have the bugs that make butyrate, go take some butyrate and take foods, eat lots of foods that can put up your bugs. They like soluble fiber, they like olive oil, they like fish oils and so on. It's a package. And this, what I say to my patients is any chance you can say to your nice, kind oncologist, can I have 3 months before I go on to the immunotherapy? Seriously, that's what I say. I say, can you say to him, you've got a cold? We shouldn't say that on there. But that's what we do. We find a reason to just give them a little break. So I've got a chance to rebuild their gut, give them lots more T cells, and then the immunotherapy might work better. Because this is the problem. It should work brilliantly. If you read all the papers and all the science behind it, 2 years of immunotherapy, your cancer should be pretty well gone. But it doesn't work. It works really well in 11% of people. That's all. And that's a sin, isn't it? That tells you it's not being used properly. Right? I stop. That's my hobby horse for this show. But I just don't think that most oncologists understand. They just see it as another drug. It's just like, oh, we've got Taxol, then we got this, then we got pembrolizumab. Oh, we'll try that one, shall we?
Yeah. Last question from Beryl Evans. I've been advised to start a treatment of trastuzumab and emtansine, which is Cadcycla, and it's for the rest of my life after my HER2 breast cancer has returned. I've had FEC chemo and Herceptin, which has not been successful for my cancer. I had a PP with you in July 19 and followed the program you recommended.
Okay. We sort of answered it two questions ago. Let me say something here, really. If you went back to when we started, 2005, 2006, but we started in 2003, but 2005, 2006, Herceptin came along and it was the wonder drug. And I think they pulled it out of research. And, the big pharma had its whole campaign. Some woman in Slough is deprived of not being able to have Herceptin because the NICE haven't approved it yet and all this, the things they do, okay? Yeah. And it was all like wonder drug. And, the guy who presented on stage at the cancer conference got clapped off stage and so on. Okay. It was going to revolutionize it because 20% of women had HER2 breast cancer and they didn't have a drug for them. Well, what happened then was Herceptin came along and it wasn't working for 5 years. It wasn't killing off cancer and so on. It works for some people for up to 5 years. Other people, not very long, maybe 15 months. And so Roche decided to bring out the daughter of Herceptin. It's called Perjeta. Sorry, I'm sticking to the simple names. And I had shares in Roche. I don't know why, but they were in my pension. So I followed it. And one night the shares tanked. They went from about 160 down to about 135. And what it was, the city had seen some research that came out where Perjeta was being used with Herceptin. It was never supposed to be used with Herceptin. It was supposed to be used after Herceptin. So it could extend the life of Herceptin. And the shares tanked because the FDA had insisted they did some research, not just used it, and he didn't do very well. And it's to this day, remembering that, I cannot understand that the city think that it didn't do well from that research, but your doctor thinks it did do well. So how many women get given Herceptin and Perjeta right from day one? It's remarkable. Now you've got this Cadcycler. Now you've also got this injection. And they're trying to give it in different ways to see if it will work longer. And I think that's not the issue. I think the issue is you've just got to try and make it work better, cleverer, which is why we use melatonin and so on. This is why Beryl I would have put her on the program I've got. But at the end of the day, HER2 cancer is not a good one to have. I'm sorry to have to say that. And I'm will have, depressed a few women watching this show. And to counter that, though, I have a lady in Alsace who, true story, who I built a program for, and she did lots of. I did a gut rebuild and everything, and she decided to take all the gut rebuild at the same time. I didn't tell her to, and 5 days later, got an email from her. She'd been to a doctor because it made her so ill, taking all 5 killers at the same time, or whatever given her, that she was really ill. And the doctor said, "What idiot put you on this?" And immediately put her on antibiotics. And then she came back to me, and I was kind of like, I didn't want to kind of do it anymore. I was just like, no, just stick to the diet. I've done the plan. Please stick to it. Anyway, she suddenly turned up for a follow-up, and she's now married or whatever, and got a different name and was in England. She did it from her car. And she said, "I've just come through to tell you this is 6 years or whatever it is since my PP, and I'm, it's all gone. Estrogen and HER2 cancer." So you can do it. If I knew what I did, I say this as a joke, but it's got a serious undertone. All I ever do with PPs is I shut the door. I shut 9 doors or 8 doors or 10 doors or whatever it needs for these people. But with HER2, it's a difficult set of doors. And all I'm ever trying to do is make the thing work better and ideally make it work for longer. And so on this whole thing about how can I make Kadcyla work better, we've kind of done it before with, what's it called? Fagso or something it's called, which is the injectable one. And you could only do the same things, which is make the cells more receptive to the drug and try and get the drug to have other things that can help it work, which is what we've covered in about 3 previous answers today. That's all you can do.
Chris, unbelievable program. I must just say, rounding up this, because I feel for people that, they're desperate for information. There are a lot of people on this call today who pay £10 to be on the video, right? They get to see it and that's it. Whereas if they paid £60 a year or £15 a quarter by standing orders to actually join, they'd get the stuff for £5. Yeah, they get it for free, and they can go back all of last year's. So I would say to people, if you get value from this, and I can't see how anybody doesn't, and you want to support Cancer Active, take out the subscription. It's on the web. Get value for money, and get all the back stuff that you can watch as many times as you want, and get all the information that you possibly need. It's just so important. Chris, what's your next show, may I ask? What is the next show?
Well, I was going to say, can I just say something there? What I am trying to do is, yes, I will do some where people will talk about their cancer and how they beat it. And I've got Zoe coming on when she gets back from South Africa. She's looking after her mum at the moment, can't travel. But she beat her breast cancer, and she was one of my patients about 7 years ago. So she's coming on probably in October. We've got Dana Flavin on next, and we're going to talk about some of the things we were talking about last time and couldn't give long enough. So we're going to be talking about things like the frequency of cancer cells and what you can do about it, and whether zappers, for example, do or don't work. So we're going to be doing that. But she's a professor, and we'll talk about some of the things that she uses. And I have got, we've just done Robert Thomas, professor. We've just done proton beam. with Carol Sikora. And what I want to do next, I'm trying to get one professor, I'll keep his name out of it, but I'm trying to get him on because I want to do ablation, HIFU, nanoknife, all those other things. Because last comment, right back from when I wrote the first book, I was talking about if only we could detect cancer early, you wouldn't have to use drugs and radiotherapy. There could be new treatments. And as you know, I've championed HIFU and nanoknife as well, and ablation. And over the last 6 months, I've had to send people, 2 lots of people with liver cancer, one with secondaries in his lungs, for ablation. They didn't even know about it. You know, it's crazy. There are hospitals, not every hospital, there are hospitals doing it in Britain, but in America, it's kind of de rigueur. Most hospitals do ablation and things like that. But now go back to the point. If you can detect cancer early, and we're on this trial in Britain, this trial started, 200,000 people, it detects, the aim is to detect 25% more people at stage 1. And you've got a little cancer, you can put a pin in either side. You can put a current across, bang, it's gone. That's when I retire. That's what I've been asking for all along. I want early detection in Britain. Guess who complained? Cancer Research. They complained. They thought it was wrong, this test. But you want early detection, and then you don't have to have the drugs. And I want to talk to at least one, and probably I may have to go to America in the end and get someone on this show who can talk to us about using these ablation, you know, HIFU, thermal techniques to kill your cancer off.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Well, you're playing golf with Matt in a couple of weeks' time, and that's what happened. He came onto me and said, I've got all these tumors on my lungs. What do I do? And I said, ablation. And he literally had to go to about 5 hospitals, and in the end he got rid of them. Got rid of all his tumors in his lungs.
You have helped so many people over the years, and I know you're going to be helping hundreds more. And on behalf of everybody watching this, I have to say thank you, mate. I've known you for a long, long time, and it just amazes me how you absorb information and are able to pass it over to people in a simple, understandable way. Half the time, words I can't even say. So I appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you very, very much. And I say to people, go on the site, sign up, get ready for the next one, and be safe.
Okay, I'll see everyone with Dana Flavin in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, then. Okay. My pleasure. Bye.